Hi, my name is Michael Dunford. I'm the Strategic Market Manager with Catalyst, and welcome to another edition of our Thought Leadership Series. This one is called Why Do Hybrid Meetings Still Pose a Challenge? I initially wanted to call it Why Do Hybrid Meetings Still Suck? I got vetoed. That's probably for the best. But this is an important topic because collaboration between in-person people and remote people is happening every single workday. But a lot of those meetings and interactions leave a lot to be desired. So today we're hoping to solve some of those challenges around how to create a more inclusive and engaging meeting in the phygital world. And phygital is just a fun little term. I'm sure you all know it, but it means physical plus digital. So that's kind of where we are today. And I've seen webinars for this topic pop up, but I don't think I've ever seen a panel as unique and diverse as this. So we have someone that is deeply thinking about space and architecture. We have someone that is thinking about all the technology and the components and the screens and microphones and how it comes together. And then someone that is at a leading innovator company that's doing this, right? And they're thinking, well, yeah, but what's next? And of course, from Catalyst's perspective, we are thinking around the things you touch and feel, those furniture items, those are critical too. So let's do some quick intros. And I'm going to start actually with you, Dave. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Dave Kutsunai, co-managing director for the IA Interior Architects Seattle studio. And I've been with IA for 22 years now. I've been working in workplace for, I don't know, almost 40 years. So been at it for a long time.
Thanks, Dave. Mark, how about you?
Mark Lawrenson, company Interium. We're a workplace integrator on a national level, headquartered out of Minneapolis. We specialize in pairing furniture, modular walls, and technology together under one umbrella.
Awesome. And then our special guest, Gary. Hi.
Hi, I'm Gary Sorrentino. I'm the global CIO for Zoom. I've been there about 4 years. I started Zoom just before the pandemic, literally like a month before the pandemic. Most of my career was on the other side of the table. I worked for most of the Wall Street banks. I've been in technology I think this is my 43rd year.
Wow. Well, and originally Gary and Mark were going to be here in person. Flights didn't work out, but it's a good thing because now we are truly doing a hybrid call. And like Dave said, it's a hybrid call. All right, I'll shut up now. Really appreciate this. Can we start at the beginning with level setting and making sure we're on the same page about some definitions of things? We're talking a lot about equitable meetings and hybrid work. What's the difference between equity, though, and equality? And can someone explain that?
Well, I could start with that one. Like before the pandemic, a lot of us thought about equality, and equality means we all get one. We all get the same. We all get the same size monitor, same size keyboard, same size desk, depending on different functions. And everything is based on everybody getting one. I think what we learned during the pandemic is it's more about equity. I might not need one. I might need a half, but someone else might need 1.5. And so today it really is about looking at what people need and then giving them what they need rather than just giving them the same. There's that whole famous thing about people looking over the fence at the ballpark, right? And if you gave everybody one's looking at the fence, right? One's way above the fence. Well, if you just gave one person 2 boxes, they would all be at the same height. That's really that's the epitome of equality versus equity.
Would anyone add to that, panelist-wise?
No. Perfectly said. Exactly.
Okay. Back to level setting, I want to make sure people understand what the actual pain points and challenges are right now. When you walk into a space, why is that meeting leaving a lot to be desired? What have you seen, for example, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing it all the time from CEOs of companies saying that I'm better off being at home because I have my own window, I have my own microphone, I have my dual displays, my headset. When I go back to the office, I'm a speck at the end of a 30-foot table. No one can see my expressions. And, the biggest buzzword is, the equitable experience right now, where all the manufacturers of Zoom, for example, are trying to solve for that with some of their different technologies we'll discuss a little bit later. But that's really what we're trying to solve for from our integrator perspective is to bring that better experience into the conference room, from a huddle room to an auditorium.
Yeah. What about you, Gary? I mean, what you're seeing these directly at clients, right?
I'd go a little further than that because that's correct. the CEO is wondering, okay, what is the other person on the other side of the screen? And that's important. But I think we also have to remember, what is my opinion in the meeting? In other words, if I'm coming and I'm going to a meeting and I'm going to the room because I want human interaction, right? I don't want to play to a screen. The one good thing is that we have to today figure out that we all look at the screen because that's good etiquette. We want to give equality and equity to the people on the other side. So we all look at the screen so everybody gets wonderful profiles, but I never actually see the body language of the person in the room. And to going back what Mark said, then I start thinking about, well, wait a second, I'm better off going back to my desk. Well, if I'm better off going back to my desk, I'm better off going home, right? Because I might have better lighting and I might have a better microphone and a better chair and everything home. So the whole goal today is not only about how we make the distant end see the people in the conference room. That is important. But how do we make the people in the conference room enjoy the conference also?
Mm. So Dave, why are we having you, someone that cares about space and architecture and design, in this call? Because usually these are just like very technology focused. Does space play a role here?
Yeah, we're still in the room experiencing the space, whether it has windows, whether it has good lighting, what's the backdrop, all of those things. But, to Gary's point, we're in the room to be with other people. And so now we have to look at whiteboards. Now we have to look at screens on the wall. Now we're trying to look at somebody at the end of the table. We don't know who's talking. It gets confusing, right? And if we're there to do our best work, and there's a lot of research around, especially for creative and innovative companies, which are almost every company now, the best way to innovate is to collaborate. Best way to collaborate is to have trust. The best and fastest way to gain trust is to be in person. And so, we see a lot of our clients calling their workforce back because they're seeing a dip in productivity, a dip in their innovation. And so and people aren't happy coming back, but once they're back, I've sat in several user groups where they were saying, I was so mad when my company ordered me back, and now I'm back. I come back more than 4 days a week. I realize now in the space, in the environment, with the people, with the buzz, with the amenities, with the energy, all of these things in placemaking, things that we're all a part of, that matters, right? And they're saying, I realized I worked 2 years from home. It was just work. And the gentleman said, now that I'm in the office, I, for the first time, feel like I work for this company, right? And that's being part of the culture. That starts to impact how long people stay with companies and how much they're engaged. So all that stuff matters, right?
Let me chime in just to play a little devil's advocate and talk about, I was on a golf trip recently when 4 of the 8 people work from home, and they said, I will not go back to the office. I will leave the company. I like what I do. So really, how do we get it? Because right now I feel like the employee owns that space, and there's so many options out there for working remote. I found that kind of interesting, how they're willing to leave the job if they don't come back, or if they're forcing them to come back, I should say. So it's kind of interesting.
Right. And they're making the comment from the golf course, right?
But there is a balance. There is a balancing act here, right? First, there's one size doesn't fit all. So inside of a company, there are many, many sizes, right? Unfortunately, there's only one CEO, right? And so a lot of them, but going back to what Mark said, there are a lot of prominent people in the world today who have left their positions because of that. Because here's the thing, the pandemic, if anything, it should have taught us to think differently. Now, I'm not saying we get a different outcome, but for each company, you need to think a little differently, and you need to look at what your people are doing and how they're going to be able to do it. But the second part is, don't bring your employees back to what it was. You see, we keep talking about earning the right of an employee's commute. Can you really just open up the door and say, welcome to 2019? In today's world? So it's 2 parts here. Part 1 is make it a place they want to come, okay? And give them tools and functionality that for today, but when I'm doing deep thinking tomorrow, I want to go back home, right? Because we don't need to do both of them there. And so I think at the end of the day, it really is about, we have to design for the flexible workforce. I also think that today, what is the flexible workforce, right? We don't actually know. because all of us have different attributes. We've all thought about the way we want to work differently. I've changed the way I want to work completely, but well, drug myself into work every day for 40 years, right? 25 on Wall Street. You work in the desk, period, right? If you had to be home, you better have a good excuse. And it might be because you're doing late night calls, and it was okay if I got a bad experience. But today, I've learned to work differently. And I agree, once I build social capital, then I can go a little further away from the room once I build social capital. So I think today, companies need to look at it in a couple of different ways. Am I earning the right of the commute? Did I do anything that makes them come back here? Am I being flexible with them, right? Because we try to trust our employees, but at the end of the day, we would never hire someone we don't trust. But the second we hire them, we seem to not trust them, right? And we need to mandate them, right? If you really trusted your employees, you would suggest, not mandate, and then let them figure it out. But I do agree that we got to provide them with the tools that they need and teach them how to work in a new way.
You said on one of our pre-calls, Gary, use this term, we need to be a magnet, not mandate.
Yes.
And
Well,
that's really stuck with me.
Well, but think about that, right? How many people, I ask this all the time, and when I ask it, when I talk on stage, if someone answers yes to the first question, they have to tell me why. So I say, okay, how many people are a magnet? And they all get that. You've designed your office so people wake up in the morning and they go, I want to go there. So when they raise their hand for that, because everybody wants to be on that side of the coin, I ask them how. So before they raise their hand, I go, before you raise your hand, there's going to be a follow-on question, how? The other side is mandate, send a note, tell them to come in, right? I think a lot of people hope their offices are magnets, but I think I'm seeing a lot of companies hedging on how much they're doing to change now. It's more of those things, if you build it, they will come. No, let them come and I will build it. And I think that's a dilemma that we're seeing with the future of work right now.
You said earlier, I think a lot of you said we have to build in for flexibility, and we can't have them come back to the same thing it was in 2019. Talk to me about that then in the nuts and bolts. Does that mean the shape of room needs to change? Does that mean the shape of a table needs to change? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'll chime in there really quick. I always tell architects when they come in, we have, I don't know, 20 architects we work with. I said there should never be another rectangular table. And they're like, well, how can that be? Everything now is about sight lines, making sure that camera and the technology from Zoom and others has the ability to see the in-room participants. Seeing the far side is easier. Now it's all about mandating that they turn their cameras on. I have a customer that they've been taught to basically belittle the company. I'd be, hey, Gary, there's something wrong with your camera. Why don't you turn your camera on? And slowly and surely, everyone gets on these meetings and their cameras are on. So, little things like that. And then room acoustics, we cannot be putting people in 3 walls of glass and have a bad audio experience and hard to even have a conversation. So that the whole setup plays into that.
Mm-hmm.
But that really goes to what we were talking about before is, look, if we build it correctly, think about it. Let's trust our employees, okay? And let's trust our employees that they will find the best place for them to be productive. And if for some reason today we're having a meeting where human interaction is important, and that place gives us human interaction, and everybody who's hybrid, there'll never be a meeting where at least one person is on the screen going forward, right? There'll always be, as long as that becomes equity and productive, sure, I would go that day too, right? You earn the right of my commute because I went there and said, you know what? There's technology. There are things there I can't have at home.
Yeah, really quick on that too. I tell, we have 25 sellers, designers here. The technology now is starting to drive the room layouts. Before it was get your conference room, how many chairs, put a display on that wall. Oh, and by the way, get some AV in there so I can plug a cable in. Now it's all about, okay, what is this room going to be? Like every room moving forward is going to have some sort of video interaction and audio interaction. At least if it's not, at least it should be planned for. No longer are we doing $100,000 boardrooms where no one knows how to work it and you're kind of touching a button and hoping you're going to call up a Polycom video. It's all Zoom, Teams, click join, have your meeting.
Yeah, so when it comes to the physicalness of that space, right, it's we spend a lot of time trying to find the right answer. What's the right answer? What's the right technology? What are we going to invest in? What are we going to design? What are we going to build? The answer for us anyway quickly becomes that there is no answer, that the that from here on out, the rate of change that we're all experiencing and the advancement at different rates from the furniture products to the technology to lighting products to the construction of rooms, all those accelerate at a different rate. And so you're going to go through the net result is continuous change, maybe now forever, right? There was a time when we could sign a 10-year lease and you knew how many small, medium, large rectilinear rooms you needed. If I had a 8-person meeting, I knew exactly which conference room to reserve. Now, the simple question cannot be answered, right? You have that 8-person meeting, what size room do you reserve? And so, and what technology is in it? It just means that we have to think about different ways to design the room. We have to think about different configurations. We have to think about how the technology is going to continue to advance and how we may need to change the lighting, the systems in the room, which walls become active or just want to be simple whiteboards, and how we can change that environment and the things in that environment continuously. And
Yeah, I think that's what we have to think about. What is the room going to be next? In other words, we're going to design it now, but we also got to think about, okay, next, we're going to have transparent monitors. So we can put monitors on the window side someday, right? We're going to have cameras built into the screen. So through OLED, we're going to have that someday, right? We're going to have, everything's going to be wireless and nothing's going to need wires to connect and things like that. So how do we make the room design so that it's not just designed for what we're going to have now and we just appreciate it for 7 years like we did before? How are we going to make it that probably in 18 to 24 months, this room's going through a refresh, right? And it might refresh where the boardroom becomes the huddle room and a new boardroom appears in a different location there. And I think that's how we have to look at this going forward, both from software, hardware, and I guess we call it furnitureware at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, Gary, I like to sell on the fact that we personalize the room. I'm going to have my Zoom compute, my Zoom room, and then I'm going to have different cameras, mic, speakers based on the room size. So in 2 years, when a new camera comes out, I'm plopping in a new Zoom certified camera or 2 or 3, and then having that technology automatically upgraded without having to rip out the whole system to start from scratch.
Or sticking one in the middle of the table now.
Yep.
Right. And forgetting the walls and things like that, right? We're seeing Neat and other providers come out with these different kind of cameras. And so I think we need to always keep an eye on what is coming out next. And, when you go to CES, you see what's going to come out in 2 years, you go, I got to design for that. We always got to design to where the tech is going, not where the tech is. And I think that's always been a problem in the past. And I think that we were taught before these rooms have to last the CapEx age, not a technology age, right? A financial CapEx age. And telecom was 7 years before, right? They're not going to last 7 years going forward.
Well, so can I go back real quick just to make sure I understand? I think it was you, Mark, said far side versus, can you just make sure I know what that means?
Well, the far side would be the remote participants on the call. So if you have dual displays, you can have one monitor dedicated to the far side. I have one customer that mandates two TVs because they want to see the far side and interactions and expressions. And I have another company, more of a construction company, that could care less about the far side. They want a biggest display as possible to look at floor plans. So it really comes down to your culture. What are you trying to drive? Are you asking people to put on their cameras? I'm on meetings all the time where there's 15 people on there with no cameras on. It's really about a culture and what you're trying to drive. And I'm just saying that it's easy to build the space around seeing the far side if they're willing to turn their cameras on. It's always, to me, in the room, and how do you get the appropriate sight lines to show Gary to the far side the same equity as me sitting in different parts of the room.
Got it. That's helpful. But it seems to me like, Gary, can you speak to a little bit about what Zoom's new AI tools are and how they're solving some of these problems just from a technology perspective, not even space?
So our new thing, we started out with Smart Gallery and now it's Intelligent Director. And what we're trying to do is look at the participants in the room and figure out what the best way to present them is. So we want people to not play to the camera anymore. We want people to interact in the room, like humans, right? Have that face-to-face conversation. We'll pick up this and we'll display it the right way. We'll show it through many different means. And we start out with 3 cameras, and now there's a camera that goes in the middle of the table. I'm sure coming up soon, there'll be back of the room cameras that are wireless. But our goal is, let's look at the room. Let's figure out Mark's best view, and let's broadcast that.
I don't know if I have a best view.
Well, but the best view we can find, right? At the end of the day, and how do we capture everybody? Because too many times someone could be sitting further back in the room, obstructed by somebody. And all of a sudden you turn on these new technologies like Intelligent Director, and you go, there are 5 people in that room. And you hit the button, and now there's 6 faces, right? And so the goal would be, we put equity back into the room. We made everybody on the, as Mark said, the far side, and it depends on which side you're on, right? But the far side from the room sees everyone and doesn't have to say, who said that? Who said that? Right? Because now I see this view. But in the room, I'm having an engaging conversation with Mark, and I'm not an actor playing towards a camera anymore. And I think you're going to see more and more of that pop up. We'll be able to put names in places. There'll be voice recognition. There'll be many things, facial recognition. Those are all down the road coming out, where how do we make, and I think Mark said it great, the far side experience good. And then how do we make the in-room good? Because as Mark said, I also want to see, I don't want to say to the distant end, hey, who said that?
Yeah.
Right? I want to be able to see who said that just the way they can see that I said that. And I think that getting that balance correct, we learned during the pandemic, everyone had their own box. We were all equal. The CEO, right? Everybody was there. There was no head of the table, right? How do we get back to no head of the table with a combination of a little bit of training, a little bit of the way we design the rooms, and a lot of it the way we design the technology?
So
Yeah,
I
and there's
love
new
the idea-
technology. Really quick, Michael. There's new technology coming out with transcription, to where it can generate a report at the end that said Mark said XYZ, and he was in the conference room. So that technology is coming. And then you mentioned center of the table. Neat and Logitech have a center of table device. I was very pessimistic on 2 things: that architects will allow us to put a Pringles can on the middle of the table. So there's always a balance with, you get this beautiful granite table, and then you got to put that big eyesore on it. So will that be allowed? And B, I was pessimistic that they're going to get the camera switching down to when I turn this way, the camera automatically grabs me to the table, talking across the table from Gary. And when I turn back here, the video bar or the camera at the front of the room gets me. They're already testing that and demoing that. So I think they're closer than what I thought they would be to actually delivering on that AI camera switching.
And I think the other thing you're going to see is we can also show chat now. So when I don't have to take out my phone, I don't got to connect my iPad. I can be interactive. The screen is showing me when people are applauding, little hearts. And so there's so many things coming right now that are trying to make that. How do we recreate what we all enjoyed at home when we were all one box?
I've seen some of I love how the cameras now zoom in on us and separate our faces, but there's something still magical about sitting across the table, or even the height, the sight line of someone. So, I mean, our camera's still being mounted really high up, and so even though it's chopping us up, it's like, so you're seeing the top of my head. I mean, talk to me about that.
I think we've completely changed that. I mean, right now, now we're seeing credenzas come out with everything built in. So now you just wheel them into a conference room and you put them in there. They have 3 cameras built into the top, 102-inch screen or something like that, right? They're set where you don't have to worry about having these cameras sky high. A matter of fact, some of the boardrooms you go to, the cameras are shoulder head, right? Because what we want to see, we're trying to grab correct views.
And that's our play. Every camera should be at 44 to 48 inches off the floor, instead of 8 feet off pointing down. We have the ability to do 7 cameras now over a single Cat 6, and then not only that, split 6 faces out of the room per camera. So when we go into a legacy boardroom, that's your bowling alley, we're able to put camera views down the side of the table and grab every 4 or 5 chairs and then present them with their own window. And then using Zoom, you're able to now give them their own stream. So it isn't the Brady box anymore. It's going to be an individual stream with zoomed in optical camera clarity. So it's not just a digitalized view where it's all grainy.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, I know you have thoughts on like getting a seat at the table, making it feel like I'm with this person. Would you add anything?
Well, it's going to be a lot of experimentation as we go forward, and starting, hopefully we can start to collect research. There's been a lot of research on human dynamics and group size, meeting size, right? So for best collaboration, group size no more than 8 or so was kind of the rule of thumb. And so everybody feels equal in the room and they can participate and collaborate. When it gets much larger than that, it becomes more informational. Only a few people talk and everybody else gathers information, and then training gets even bigger, right? So there's some rule of thumbs around group dynamics and room size. But this is brand new,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This is some of us together and everybody else remote, and then another group of people in another room altogether. So what is that human dynamic, right? When we're partial this and partial that, and does that change the group size for different tasks or not? And so I think be interesting to see what research starts to come out of that and how that drives design of spaces and kind of technology advancement.
I do think the one thing that I agree that we need to take a better view at it, a more informational view at it, but companies are trying to get people back into the office now. And these rooms do not get created overnight. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to take some assumptions here, right? Because again, build it and they will come. Are we earning the right of the commute? You just can't put a sign up and say, we're waiting for more data, right? We're going to have to, these are going to be built on the fly. This jet, we will change the oil on this jet while it's in the air. Right? It'll have to be that we can change these rooms around. They're going to be built very flexible, within days, not months sometime, right? Because if we're going to change the dynamic of a room, hey, it doesn't work for our board, but now we have to reconfigure it for a huddle room, right? We had 3 years of empty space while no one was there where we could work 24/7, and we missed that opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Now we have to deal with, paint fumes and electricians and people like that, right, coming in. And so I think we have to find that balance again about how are we going to put these rooms in? And again, to what we said, how do we make them flexible? The day you walk in, if it doesn't work, well, we're not living with the room that way. We can reconfigure it a little better, right? We could raise the cameras from 44 to 60 if it works in that room because there's a higher table, right? Yes, we might have to break down and actually drill a hole right in the middle of the granite table, right? Because that's the best thing for the room, right? If you don't want to drill a hole in $100,000 table, don't buy a $100,000 table.
Yeah.
And things like that. And I think we really need to step back and have a pragmatic view of what are we trying? Are we trying to show off a table? We're trying to get people to collaborate.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing a couple of efforts in parallel. One is immediate. We have rooms. What do we do with them? How do we refit them out? And it's from try to reuse the rectilinear table to get rid of the table and bring in lounge furniture, right? And everything in between. So it's like, what do we do with the physical space as it is now, because we're stuck with it. And then in parallel, especially for larger companies who have the time to do that, and they got multiple projects coming in the future, how do we understand what the new configuration should be? And how do we build in the agility so that that room can change? Not the stuff in it, but also the stuff that the things that construct the room as well. The systems, the ceiling, floor patterns, the walls. Can they reconfigure a room in space at a moment's notice?
We've been talking so much about, and I think about this in terms of meetings, seeing someone. But Mark, I know you're passionate about hearing them. Like, so what are we not thinking about in terms of audio and acoustics?
Yeah, I hear everything about equitable experience, this and that. Someone needs to coin the phrase equitable audio. I mean, it's more important. Like, we can have a meeting with good audio and bad video. Vice versa, someone comes out of that room looking for someone to yell at, saying, I can't have my meeting. Versus, hey, I had my meeting, there was an issue in conference room 101. Can you check on that? So we're very, very consultative and bullish on audio. Like, I'll walk into project that says, forget about black boxes and TVs. What are we doing for acoustic wall treatments? Because I see now that you have a 12-foot ceiling and you have wood floors and you have glass walls, it's going to be an echo chamber, and there's no magic that I can make happen that's going to make it sound great. So really being consultative on that side of the thing really positions us differently, I think, than just saying, if I work for Logitech or I work for Neat, I say put a sound bar in every room. It works great. They can hear you. Yeah, but then all of a sudden you're at 15 feet and you have 8 people in the conference room and it sounds terrible. So we demonstrate that. We have rooms that are set up that aren't how we think it should be. And virtually we can go to the next room and say, this is how it should be. So allow customers to see and hear those rooms, make a big difference for us from a business aspect.
Yeah. Gary, any thoughts on that? I mean, what are you seeing in terms of audio? Is there stuff
Yeah.
coming out with?
I think audio is very important because we can always have a meeting, and I agree with Mark. He said we can always shut the cameras off if we have to, right? If I pixelate slightly when I go back and forth, that isn't acceptable. But not hearing whether I say we are buying that company or we're not buying that company, right? At the end of the day, we have to be able to articulate and verbalize clearly. And I have been in rooms that are set up incorrectly, and it is not a good experience where you don't even care. It could be crystal video. Okay, that's good, but we communicate through voice.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's so important today when both sides present, right? Because sometimes we're getting a bad audio signal from the room, and I'm at the distant end struggling to listen. I have my mic is turned, my speaker at home turned up as far as possible, or I'm presenting from home and everybody in the room can't hear me. Each one is just as bad. So I do think that audio is, you will remember a bad audio conference before you'll remember one where the video wasn't perfect.
Yeah, or you can be
Completely
hugging
agree.
over a laptop like Dave and I in a room.
Well, it's a perfect example. You go into a room and you have multiple laptops trying to make it work. It's so frustrating, and everyone gets on edge, and pretty soon they just hang up and they complain. Table mics will always sound better than ceiling mics. However, when we talk about reconfigurable rooms, a lot of times we can't do table mics, or it's a granite table. They don't want table mics. We're a big Shure integrator, with the fact that Shure ceiling mics, I feel like they're the best in the industry, especially if you can keep them at 9 feet or lower. When we start seeing these big high ceilings, I'll tell my customers, like, we have to suspend these microphones. We want them at 8, 9, 10 feet at the max, especially if it's not a good acoustical room. So very, very bullish on audio.
A quick design oriented question. So we're in a room that is a rectangle, and there's a screen right at the end, and the table, it's not a rectangle table, it's got some taper, but still, should we have thought about putting a screen in a different location, or should it always be on the far side? Any opinion?
Let me hit on that, because I have issues written down on a little notes here. I have other issues: side of room displays, round tables, and 12 people rooms becoming 6. So the frame, or the phase right now is 21:9 stretch displays. You flip the room and you put it on the side of the room, and everyone has a better experience. Problem is, you're going I'll have facilities people come in and say, I don't have many conference rooms. I can't take a 12 or a 14 person room and make it 6. So that's a challenge. And then you start talking about wide angle field of view for these cameras, or multiple cameras. Luckily, Zoom has the intelligent director where you can have multiple cameras that solves for that problem. And then round tables. Everyone wants round tables. And the problem is, a lot of times, since the display is on one side, you lose half that round table, and you turn an 8-person table into 4. So if anyone has anything to add to that, I'd be interested to hear it.
I'd say even be creative today. We're now seeing people experimenting with no display on the wall. Everybody's getting a pad, right? And everybody's able to communicate in the room, talk around. Everybody's got their own device and things like that. And we are seeing a lot of people are now experimenting, especially with the round room, saying, why do you need a display? Right. And so we really, I think most of us have said it is an experimental stage. We need to be flexible. Maybe that screen on the wall we'll use for a whiteboard if we want to get up and write. So there's a physical board for that. Or we turn that pad in front of me into a little touch screen. I can annotate, right, Mark's whiteboard right there from my own screen. But we need to take the technology to that next level. And what does the 5-year conference room look like? I don't even think we can go 5 years. Maybe what's the 3-year conference room look like compared to today? And it could be that one of the things that are missing are the screen on the wall.
Well, you already talked about the other day about projecting holograms too. I mean,
we'll see that soon.
Yeah. And how does that affect, that's fascinating. Like, am I
So
going
I was
to?
at I was at LEAP last year, and I'm going again this year in a couple of weeks, and I presented holographically. So I stood in front of a green screen and I was presenting in a phone booth on the other side. Right, as a test. It wasn't a real presentation, and people saw me presenting. So we are going to see that we can bring presenters to stages. But if we can bring presenters to stages, why can't we bring board members into boardrooms with these, what they're calling half units, that actually sit where I would sit in the boardroom, right? And I would just be an image there, right? And so look, that is the tomorrow.
Yeah, VR headsets are another thing to start thinking about. You look at Apple's new one, like look at how that might change the way an office is laid out, or how people interact at home.
So, Gary, I think you kind of started to light a fire under us. You said, yeah, but companies are trying to bring people back now, so we can't. What role does generations in the workplace play, Gen Z versus others?
So we're seeing this intergenerational working happening right now. And a lot of this has to do with the way people work. Think about it. I'm a boomer, right? Technically, I shouldn't be a chat person. I should be a phone person, right? So I think there's two parts here. We know that there are 4 generations going to be in the workforce this year, 4 very dominant, with the newest generation being very strong-willed, which is great. Because when you sit down and you interview them, they want what we want, but they're willing to walk away if they don't get it, right? If we can't give them an equitable experience, if it can't be a learning experience, if it can't be an investment in them, which is what we want, right? They want the better working conditions, then they'll leave. And there's a large percentage, what is it? They do quiet quitting. What is it? 50% are quitting within the first 90 days. 55% have a gig job. So they're really working on 2 jobs at once. But also what I see happening is a lot of us are now looking at the different generations, not doing it on paper, but saying, I would rather do this and I would rather do that. One of the things I noticed when I came, Zoom is a very high tech company, right? With lots of young minds, brilliant. And I would call them and I would get a chat that said, I'm sure whatever you need, we can handle over chat. And so I changed a little bit. So I think today, when a Gary walks in or a Mark walks in or you walk in or someone walks in, it's very hard to determine what they require, because I've changed during the pandemic, right? Where I'm not the same person they sent home, right? For the first time in my career, I changed the way I work. I took advantage of it and I adapted. And so today we have a lot of people adapting the way they work. So it's very hard to determine what does a person need without really asking them in some cases. And as we're bringing on a new tech savvy, very, very we generation, the new generation of workers loves the togetherness, right? They love group solving. They love huddles. They love things like that. We have to be willing to accommodate that and find that we want to be in there too. And so I think this intergenerational multiple mindset working is something we're going to have to understand quickly. 30% of our workforce will be Gen Z by the end of this year.
Dave, you must have thoughts on Gen Z in the workplace and how that's affecting what your clients are doing with their spaces. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's easy for us to generalize. What we see when we really get down to it is somebody's Gen Z in their culture won't be the same as somebody else's Gen Z in that culture.
Yep.
And the Gen Z doing this kind of work for this kind of company is different than the Gen Z doing that kind of work for that company. So the variables, right? While we love to like put it all in a box and say, here's the easy answer, it's not at all. The variables are multifaceted, which in every direction, whether you want to talk gender, whether you want to talk ethnicity or culture, whether you want to talk mobility and neurodiverse, or I mean, every category you take, it's going to be super diverse. And it leads us to the answer is there is no answer, which opens the door to equitable design. How can we all design for the most amount of people?
Right? I think that's why we call it merging multiple mindsets now, because it really is about this diversity of everyone.
Yeah.
Right? This diverse, you can't, there is no more 4 different systems working together, because again, I'm a good example. In one of my slides, I take the 4 attributes of the 4 generations. I put my face in the middle and I go, I'm all and I'm none, right? Figure me out. And I think that's what we're trying to say here is that the diversity of the human employee going forward, right, is so dynamic. And how are we going to figure out how it works? And how are we going to design around it? I mean, we have to find some common ground.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key is no matter what generation you are, but specifically Gen Z, you don't want to walk into a room and not have it work. And you don't want that experience to be bad. So that could be our baseline. Like, how is it easy at least? Because they are so tech savvy.
I want it to work when I go into a room. Okay. And I'm far from that generation, but I think everybody wants, if you really look back and look at their non-negotiables, they have a term for non-negotiables, they're ours too.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me touch on that a little bit. You know, when we start talking about we just want it to work, I challenge people that we've had CIOs of some major companies say, I want everything to work. I want Zoom, I want Teams, I want WebEx, I want Google Meet, I want everything. My recommendation to them is pick their platform and not to be afraid of telling people, hey, if I need to bring people into a conference room, I need to host this meeting and it's going to be in Teams or it's going to be in Zoom. We like to be remain agnostic and basically tell customers we can get them a join button in every room. Yes, there's guest join into Zoom and WebEx and Teams, but it's not a great experience. So pick your platform and live with it. And once we start seeing that, where you're not trying that magic bullet, the rooms are much easier to use, and the customer satisfaction goes through the roof.
Anything you'd add to that, Gary?
No. I think it's true. I think we have to figure out that while everything connects a big word, right? It will function, but I do think we have to figure out, what do you want the rooms to do? What's the best product or set of products that does that? And that's a combination of hardware or software, right? And then figure out how to go forward with it. And I think we're gonna keep experimenting with that. You know, all the vendors, ourselves included, are going to get better connecting with each other. We're all going to come up on parity on different functions and features. But at the end of the day, it is trying to solve for that one variable that I think the human, right? What does the human want? What does the human need? And what does it provide? And when the human wakes up tomorrow and wants something different, how do we switch gears? And I think that's the important part we got to think about today.
Yeah, it's refreshing to finally focus on the human and not the room itself or the technology. Yeah. I do want to at least briefly touch upon this asynchronous work. And I saw you, Gary, talk about this at other, I watched some of your YouTube videos. And so it's like work, yes, work is happening when you're meeting in person, but then all the other stuff is happening offline, right? Asynchronously. How is Zoom thinking about asynchronous work and how collaboration and work gets done in this new era?
So first of all, Zoom chat is basically the asynchronous tool, right? That's one of the tools that allows us to work asynchronously. I can put something out there that I'm thinking about now and get responses over X period of time. But we're also thinking about it even in the sense of a meeting. Think about a meeting. If you're going to have a meeting next Thursday, not this Thursday, next Thursday, the meeting starts next Thursday. But using a product like Zoom, a continuous meeting chat, the second you set up that meeting, a chat set up for everybody in that meeting, suddenly I get an invite to a chat. And I look at the agenda for next Thursday's meeting and I realize number 1 is already done. So I say, oh, wait a second. Sorry. Hey, Mark, number 1's already done, but why don't we add number 7? Someone else says, wait a second. We need these collateral to talk about that number 6. Someone else says, well, I'm not actually going to be in this meeting. There's nothing on here. All of a sudden, the meeting starts the day the meeting goes into the calendar. Okay, now we can collaborate asynchronously because you know what? That meeting's not really important to me, but it will be tonight when I'm just 7 o'clock deciding to catch up. So I might add some of my comments then, but I don't have to add it 2 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, by the time the meeting starts, we've all added value. Let's hope it's all value, but we've all added value. We've put and take onto it. Now the meeting starts. Or maybe the meeting doesn't have to start because we worked asynchronously and we saved that hour. Okay. Or it does start hallelujah, right? or the meeting does start, we bring that chat into the meeting and we pick up from the last chat. Now, we meet for an hour. There's a lot of to-dos to do and things like that. Normally what happens is, I'll see you next Thursday, tell me how you did. Well, I don't want to hear you next Thursday. I want you to start telling me how you did now. So now that chat will live on and people can continue to work asynchronously towards the same goal, right? No more is the meeting really just coming together to level set. We can do that all along the way. And I think what's happened during the pandemic that I learned was there are 24 hours in the day. And I learned there are certain things I do well during the 8 to 5 shift. And there are certain things I do better later in a different shift. Like if you want more than a 1-word answer, that's going to come at night. Because that's when a cup of coffee, I'm relaxing, the day's over, I'm not getting pinged constantly. I can put two sentences together and they both make sense in the same language, right? And so I think that asynchronous work today has really taught us about, we don't need to be giving answers right away. Now, something has to be synchronous. Like if you're a banker and you want to know the status of a mortgage, you want that right away, right? And chat's still the best way to get that. But I could say, hey, I just got off the phone with my client. Could you give me some of the details of his mortgage? I'm going to meet him tomorrow at 3. Oh, I don't got to answer that now. Now I can answer that. I can add value to it rather than just giving a quick yes, no answer. And I think the world is starting to learn that asynchronous work is probably one of the most productive things we can do right now.
If it means less meetings, like we cancel a meeting because we actually solved all the problems before we had to meet, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. It's just about, meetings are usually about getting people together, and a lot of times it's just for status, right? But if we can get that interim status before the meeting starts, maybe the meeting takes another direction. Maybe when we finally meet, we move I look at it this way. Sometimes they move the football inches during the chat before the meeting, and then maybe with the meeting, we move it yards, right? But at the end of the day, that football is moving down the field every single chat, every single time.
Yeah. So I think a couple other things. I mean, we do want some time for Q&A, but I do just want to make sure I have one thing more about asynchronous work. So if I'm in a meeting with people in person, then there's also a chat scrolling. So maybe there's some stuff going on in there, and then there's people on the far side. Does any of that start to get distracting, or is that still a great way to asynchronously work and meet at the same time? Any thoughts on that?
Look, I think we've all learned to multitask, right? And so for a large part of the meeting, right, there's nothing wrong with people being able to chat. I think one of the things that chat or asynchronous working has done is some people will verbalize in a meeting. Some people feel more comfortable chatting in a meeting, their opinion, right? Some people feel more comfortable just acknowledging with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's built equity back in. If this meeting is verbal only, and I like to think about things before I verbalize, I might miss that meeting because they're going to go on to another topic. But I can actually start to formulate my opinions and put it into chat and things like that. So I think by using the two tools together, it's a more equitable meeting for people because different work styles can come together and still communicate. That's one thing I love about the Zoom platform is it doesn't matter how you want to work. We all meet in the middle at Zoom.
It's a great point. I think it's, me as someone who's classically kind of extroverted. Yes, I'm always talking during meetings, but then there's other people that need to really process and think about it and then formulate an amazing answer, but it's going to happen later or it's going to happen via text. So that's a great reminder.
Yeah.
Mark, does that change the display then that we do? I mean, should we always be doing 2 or should we be doing bigger giant displays that can section things up?
Yeah, again, that kind of comes back to your culture, like I touched on before. 2 displays are going to be better than one when you're going to be displaying more information. But again, you're going to have potentially 2 undersized displays then in a room that should have 1 larger display. So it's really getting to know the customer and what their cultures are and what they're trying to deliver to their end users.
The one thing I did want to make sure we did in this is actually give people some attainable micro goals or recommendations, because this still feels kind of daunting. What do I do? What's the first step? And like I said before, we are going to send some follow-up information that could be helpful too. So who wants to go first with like, what's one thing we could start to accomplish tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, I would challenge you to find an integrator that's going to be consultative and not an order taker. I interview people all the time, and they leave the door, and I'm like, that's why we went right there. That person is a dinosaur. They're not evolving. They're still stuck in 2019. We need to be specialists, and we need to be consultative for our customers to earn their business. And that's number one, in my opinion, is challenge. Get outside the box and find someone that can be that specialist for you.
Dave?
Yeah, I would second that. Same for participating design firms or dealers or those of us closer to the client, there's run the parallel track. What can you do now, immediate, with your existing condition to make it better, but be thinking about the future and be thinking about a longer term solution that will allow you constant short-term actions and improvements.
Okay. Gary, what's one
Yeah,
little thing we
I
can
think
do?
I think one of the things you have to look for is who's actually thinking about tomorrow. A lot of times you'll meet these, and I heard what we said here, but a lot of times it's not just enough of being consultative. It's also enough about being able to say, look, let's start thinking about what the future is going to be like. How are we maybe I might, and you go back to micro goals, I might not be able to get you to the end result yet because, well, some of the technology's not invented. However, I can get you there in stages, right? We can make it equip the best thing for the way it will work today. But then in 6 months, I'm going to throw the cameras out and we're going to buy new cameras, right? But that's a step in a journey there, right? But think about a company that really is not only thinking about what's on the market today, but as they're really in tune to what's coming out tomorrow. Next generation, look, what did Gretzky say? Where the puck is going, right? Just think about where the puck is going and then think 6 months further than that. And then try to figure out, okay, how are we going to align to some of those things that we're seeing? It's all about being consultative, but it's also being able to say, you know what you need, I'll get you there, but I can't get you there in one step.
So speaking about what you need, like sales 101 is listening to your customers and what they need. I challenge that our customers don't know what's out there to even know what they need. Right. It's my job and our job as a company to show them and to demonstrate how to do things. And I think that's how we position ourselves so well in the marketplace, is by doing that.
But give them options, right? You got to give them options. You got to say, there's always high, medium, low, right? At some cases, but I do think it is showing them. A lot of people don't want to show them what the future is like. You go to buy a car and you say, well, when's the next version coming out? Maybe I'll wait 3 months, right? Yeah. At some point in time, you got to actually say, hey, I got to buy a car.
That's why we peripheralize the room though, because it's going to change in 2 years. Easy to swap.
Or less maybe now.
Yeah.
Well, it's, and I hear this and I think money, so one of the questions actually I just looked in the chat was, how do we do something like this on a small budget? I don't know if we can tackle that right now real quick, but I mean, is this stuff super expensive or can we do stuff in a better way?
No, I mean, the integration market is terrified right now. They're losing out. They're not getting their $100,000 boardrooms anymore. But what they should be getting is $10,000 rooms on that same budget, making sure that I always tell people a huddle room to an auditorium should be the same user interaction, walk in, click, join. There's going to be different cameras, mics, and speakers, but if you have a huddle room budget, you can do a room with no display from the ground up, from anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000, depending on the display size. So you're going to have your technology bar or your compute, and then you're going to build around it. So it doesn't have to be a high ticket dollar value.
You know how I would also answer this question from Dave? Teach your employees about the technology you've already given them. You would be surprised. I go into companies and I show them how to maximize what they already own, right? And the average user is using 2 to 4% of what we give them already. If we could just get them to 6%, right? You go in and they go, I never knew I could do that. Wait a second. You mean if I hit this button, I'm going to get a translation or a transcription? Yeah. Well, when is that going to be available? Well, like 2 years ago. Well, what does it cost to turn it on? It's included. Okay. And I think that's the biggest impact I see today is a lot of people have onboarded some great technology over the last 2 years. Okay, let's leverage it. Let's make sure that we have the right people. And what do I call them? Influencers. I love going into large companies and finding these influencers, these people who really want to be able to grab the technology and get to the next level. And I love when a CEO calls me up and says, how come someone in my organization very far down just presented in a way on technology I use every day in a way I never imagined could happen? And then they go, did you train them? And I go, yeah. Well, when are you going to come and train me? So I think today, some of the biggest impact is use what you have. We're all buying Maseratis, but we're driving them like Priuses. And I think we can have a very big impact if we just teach people how to leverage what we already have first. And it'll actually go to what we're talking about. Then people will be able to tell us what do they want.
Yeah.
Right? Because now they're actually experiencing it in a different way.
And here's a 30-second add to that. Everyone's told to put a video bar in their room and it solves everything, but the audio is poor. I show customers every day why certain brands are better because we get extension mics. It's all extended over a Cat 6 to the table. Now I have clear audio. And guess what? That room that was bad is now efficient and good.
Yeah.
Well, I just hope organizations start to experiment and test things too. Because yeah, we can't just have analysis paralysis and overthink this. We need to just start to put out a minimum viable product, right? And see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, Gary, Mark, and Dave. We really appreciate, and to everyone on the call and in the room over there, hi. Thanks for joining us today.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks. Good to see
Bye.
you again, Gary. See you guys.
Thank you much.